Well, I think his goals are going to be quite clear. Putin's goals he's going to have two main goals here. His first goal is going to be to delay further measures against Russia to allow him to continue the war. So he's going to, I would anticipate, he's going to propose the establishment of some commissions to talk about peace terms, the commissions to talk about, ceasefires at sea, in the air, on energy infrastructure, on civilian infrastructure, freezing of front lines, sanctions, whatever it may be. He's going to create the impression of action toward peace. Let's set up a talking group here, let's set up an expert group there, let's set up a commission or whatever it may be, in order to basically take time. And then when the Americans say, well, we need to impose more sanctions, he's going to say, well, hold on, come on, let's give it a chance for these things to work, let's give peace a chance, we need to let things go. I think that's going to be his first objective, to create the impression of some form of activity, which is going to allow him, it's going to buy him, maybe 2 or 3 months of more time to continue the war without getting these additional measures against him, against Russia, the sanctions measures, the tariff measures against Russia's trading partners like India and China, measures against Russian banking system, measures against Russia's shadow fleet of oil tankers, all these things that are being discussed and that are being done partially, but there's always this threat that the West is going to get serious and Trump himself is going to get serious. So his top priority is going to be stalling tactics, buying time, stretching it out further, and creating the impression of peace. The other thing on his agenda, the other key point on his agenda, is going to be trying to divide the West, to get Trump to split from Europe, to say basically, essentially, you're a great guy, Trump. I love you. We love America. We want to work with America. But these Europeans, well, they're troublesome. They're warmongers. They want war. They're the ones who are causing the war now. They're the problem. So we need to work together, me and you. Trump and Putin need to work together as the two great world leaders to stop these Europeans who are trying to cause a war here, trying to cause a bigger war, trying to prolong the war, trying to prevent peace. So that's going to be a secondary message, I think. I want peace. Let's set up all sorts of different structures to try and establish this peace. They'll all be rubbish. They'll all be nonsense. But he'll try and do that to try and stall for time. And then the other message will be, let's work against the Europeans. Let's not let them stop us working toward peace.
Since you already mentioned sanctions, at the end of July you published a UkraineAlert report at the Atlantic Council saying that the US President Donald Trump was very disappointed with Putin and gave him 10 more days to agree to a ceasefire or face new sanctions. And basically the deadline passed last Friday, but no new sanctions, as we know, were imposed. So when do you think Trump's patience will actually run out? And what does the lack of sanctions mean? Do you think Trump is giving Putin another peace chance, I would say?
Yeah, well, this is what this summit's all about. This summit is all about avoiding sanctions, first and foremost. And not only sanctions. When we talk about sanctions, we really should talk more broadly about economic measures, because I think the sanctions is, there's direct sanctions on Russia, there's indirect sanctions on Russia's economic partners like India and China. There are tariffs on Russia's exports and on the customers, Russia's customers. And there are also, I think, the most important economic measure of all would be efforts to bring down the price of oil on the world market, which could have a major impact on the Russian economy. And that's something that Trump has spoken about quite openly. And I would imagine that there's a lot of discussion behind the scenes about how to do that. And Trump has a very good working relationship, for example, with the Saudis. Now, the Saudis can play a key role in bringing down the price of oil, potentially. So these are all measures that Trump can do. So again, what we're seeing here with this summit is all about Putin saying, hold on, don't do it yet. Let's have this talk. Let's have all these debates about potential peace moves and steps toward peace. And of course, if we're going to do that, of course we can't have sanctions, because that would be counterproductive. Now, I think, to be fair, Trump also is not very eager to impose these sanctions. He's not rushing to do it. So he welcomes the opportunity to have an excuse to say, OK, we're not going to do it now. But fundamentally, this is all about Vladimir Putin using his stalling tactics, which he's done since January, since Trump returned to the White House. He's used these tactics again and again and again and again. And every time Trump says, you know what, you mentioned him, when's he going to run out of patience? Every time Trump looks like he's about to run out of patience, Putin comes up with a new trick. If it's direct talks with the Ukrainians in Istanbul, or it's talks with the Americans in Saudi Arabia, we had first of all, and so on and so on. So, of course, at some point, it has to become too much. But for now, there's always this sense, come on, give it a chance, give it a chance. And as long as Trump can sell it to his audience in America, his core audience, his voters essentially, it can continue almost endlessly. I think at some point it will we will reach the moment where even his hardcore base in America says we're being made fools of here. Trump, Putin is just laughing at us. But we're not there yet, clearly. And now we're in a new round. Now we've got, but every time, I think it's important to point out, every time Putin has to come up with something bigger. So first of all, he's saying, okay, let's get our teams together in Saudi Arabia. Then he's like, okay, we're going to have direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul. Now he's saying, okay, now we're going to have a summit between me and Trump ourselves, personal summit. So, it's hard to know where they're going to go beyond that. He's already got this may be his trump card, as it were, that he's played now. So who knows? But at this stage, it's not clear when he's going to run out of patience.
Another statement which I also want to discuss, Trump suggested that US is proposing territorial concession by Kyiv, including returning some Ukrainian-led areas to Russia. What exactly does it mean? And are we basically talking about Ukraine giving up its own lands to Russia?
Well, we don't know exactly what he means. When we talk, I think the key point in here is de facto or de jure, legally, officially, or just recognition. Now, Ukraine itself has said, President Zelensky and many Ukrainian officials have said for a long time now, for over a year, I would say, they recognize that a peace deal is likely going to mean accepting the long-term occupation of the areas of Ukraine that are currently occupied, more or less. There might be some minor corrections to the front lines here or there, around certain strategic areas, perhaps to create a more permanent border or a more defendable border, where in terms of geographical elements like rivers and so forth. But fundamentally, the Ukrainians have been saying for some time, we recognise this. We recognise that we're going to have to acknowledge this and accept this, and we're going to have to say, okay, we're going to forego a military solution and we're going to work diplomatically to get this territory back. What the Ukrainians have always said they will not do is officially cede the territory to Russia, to change the map, as it were, to redraw the maps and say, okay, Donetsk is now Russian, Lugansk is now Russian, or, Kherson or Zaporizhia, whatever it may be, regions, Berdyansk, all these areas that are under Russian, or Crimea for that matter, all these areas under Russian occupation. So Trump has not specifically addressed that. He's not said whether he thinks that Ukraine will have to officially cede territory to Russia or whether it will de facto have to acknowledge that this area is controlled by Russia. And that's a big red line. That's going to be a sticking point. So we need to see what they mean by that and what the Russian position is, because that could be, that everything could hinge on that. If the Russians say no deal unless we officially get this territory recognized by Ukraine and then by the whole international community as Russian, then it's no deal, because there's no way that any Ukrainian government will accept that, and there's no way, frankly, I think that if for whatever reason the Ukrainians said, you know what, fine, I think that most European countries nevertheless would say we're never recognising that, because as soon as you recognise that, you're eventually saying the entire post-World War II world order, where the fundamental ruling is you cannot change borders by force, is gone. And then every single country in the world knows, okay, so I can change a border by force and then I can get the world to recognise it. We're back to basics. We're back to the 19th century, the 18th century even. We're back to a world where might makes right, where countries can be invaded, where borders are no longer inviolable, massive insecurity. So much of the world we live in today depends on these fundamental securities that we have based on that principle, that core principle that you cannot change borders by force.